Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode, we are going to be looking at Genestealer cult. Wait. I know what you're thinking. You want to click off the video. You want to call the commissar in here. I know, but bear with me. Specifically, we are going to be looking at Brood Brothers Auxilia. And I want to see if this detachment can be fully adapted for the Imperial Guard. Because we are, coming up to a year in 10th edition 40k, and the Guard has been chugging along with the same combined arms detachment. Sure, the rules have changed a little bit here and there, but essentially it's lethal hits. And so what I want to do is see if we can use Brood Brothers as essentially a secondary detachment for the Guard to help us keep things fresh, interesting, and exciting. And so with all of that said, let us not mess around any further. Let's grip our lasgun with two hands and fix bayonets with the third one and dive right into today's episode.
Attention guardsmen, the commissariat has detected you have not yet liked this video. Do so immediately or else you will face the Emperor's wrath. And anyone who has not yet subscribed to the channel will be transferred to the penal battalions. That is all. Move out!
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the rules, I actually want to talk about what I think is the most important thing that Brood Brothers can bring to the table, and that is flavor. In my opinion, the most important thing that any Warhammer 40k army can have is flavor, is the rule of cool. Do you have lots of different ways that you can play an army? And do those different detachments or sub-factions bring their own unique flavor, their own unique style to an army, which allows you to try new things out and to keep things feeling fresh? And if I was going to be honest, I think one of the areas where Guard is slightly struggling, I don't want to over-exaggerate or anything, but I think where we're slightly struggling in 10th edition is we lack a little bit of flavor. We've had some new units like Rogal Dawns come in, which haven't had much lore around them, and we've been using the same detachment for the last 12 months, and we've only had the one attachment. We've not really been able to bounce around and try different things out. It wasn't like back in 8th edition when I could use more Iron Guard for one detachment, and then next game I could try out the Cadians. We just haven't had that. And similar in 9th edition when you had all the custom detachment rules, all the custom regiment rules, none of that's there at the moment. And so yes, with the balanced data slate, our detachment rule has changed, and now the way the lethal hits are generated is different, but at the end of the day, when you boil it down, it still very much is just lethal hits. That's the whole Guard thing. And I think that Guard could really do with a little bit more flavor, and I think that Brood Brothers Auxilia can bring that to the table. What this army represents to me is maybe a slightly less disciplined force, maybe more of a militia, more of an auxiliary force. Perhaps the Brood Brothers rules represent a PDF, a planetary defense force, or a hastily conscripted army, one that has access to much of the Guard's hardware, but is having to fill their ranks out with auto guns and mining lasers over having full-blown las cannons and las guns. And rather than the onus being on the player to create the flavor and restrict what units they want, like, oh, if I'm taking Kachans, I can only use Kachan units that have flames in their squads. Instead of doing that, instead of restricting stuff, what Brood Brothers does is add flavor by adding options. So you can use this to create a really cool militia, planetary defense force style army, and you can use this to maybe add new units and new playstyles in with cult ambush stuff to represent things like Kachans. However, I appreciate this is a bit of a soft factor. It's a little bit intangible. Some of you guys want to know what Brood Brothers can do for you. What is it bringing to the table? And so without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty and look at the rules around this detachment. First up, we have the detachment bonus, which is integrated tactics. Each time an Ashed Militarm unit from your army is selected to shoot, you can select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to that unit. If you do, until the end of the phase, models in that Ashman unit can only target that enemy unit, and only if it is an eligible target, and that enemy unit is caught in overlapping fire. While an enemy unit is caught in overlapping fire, each time a Genestealer cults model from your army targets that enemy unit with a ranged attack, add 1 to the hit roll. Long story short, if you take an Ashman unit and you shoot an enemy unit, then the Genestealer cult units in your army will get +1 to hit against that enemy unit. On the one hand, I actually really like this detachment rule. Firstly, it means that you can get +1 to hit on a lot of your Genestealer cult units like Neophytes, something which they have struggled with. As someone that has run Genestealer cults in 10th edition, one thing that put me off them pretty quickly was the fact that when I tried to run my Neophyte horde, I was hitting on 4s a lot of the time, and I was really struggling to get those shots to connect. Now I can get pretty much all the Neophytes that I want to hit on 3s, and that is going to make a big difference. Any guard veterans from the early days of like 8th edition will tell you that hitting on 3s is just so mind-bogglingly better than hitting on 4s. Statistically, it's like, oh, it's 60% better. No, it's so much better. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but back in 8th edition, GW made Lehman Russes at one point like 120 points each. They were dirt cheap, and nobody took them. And everybody still paid like over 200 points for Lehman Russ tank commanders just because they had ballistic skill 3+. That is the difference, and that is the importance of being able to go from hitting on a 4, hitting on a 3. And so this is a really big plus in my eyes. On top of this, you are less dependent on orders to make this happen. You don't have to worry about your officers getting sniped out, and you don't have to worry about officers taking up tax and points from your army list. Instead, you can have units of guard infantry or guard vehicles that will happily be blazing away, setting the tracer fire up, and not only giving your Genestealer cults +1 to hit, but also doing their own damage. It's kind of like take aim, which is the best order that guard have access to right now. Arguably, you could say move is better because of movement wins games, all that kind of stuff, but putting that to one side for a second, take aim is definitely one of the best orders that guard has. And imagine if you had take aim that not only allowed you to get +1 to hit on some of your units, but also actually did damage to the opponent. That's why I like this so much. It's like take aim, but version 2.0 and better. On the other hand, it's a shame that your guardsmen don't benefit from this attachment themselves. Sure, they're providing the tracer fire, they're providing the Genestealer cult marker lights, but they're not actually getting a big bonus out of this attachment themselves. Where the guard units start getting a bonus, it comes in later with things like stratagems. Now, all of this talk about guard units fighting alongside Genestealer cult units, well, we need to know how much guard we can take in our GSC army. In the Brood Brothers attachment only, you can take up to half of your points as Ashman units. So in a 2,000 point game, you could spend 1,000 points bringing Imperial Guard, and then you could bring 1,000 points with the Genestealer cult. Now it's important to note that it's up to 1,000 points. There's no pressure, there's no need to take exactly 1,000 points with stuff to max this out if you don't want to. I think the smart way of playing this would be to take a few supporting guard units and then use those to buff up your Genestealers. But that's a smart way, not necessarily the guard way, not necessarily the fun way, the Flavor Town way. If I was to do this, I would absolutely spend 1,000 points on guard units because I'm trying to make this an alternative guard attachment, and I'm not really doing that if I'm not spending a crap load on Imperial Guard units. So absolutely smart way is season your GSC with Ashman, but the Chad way, for lack of a better way of putting it, the fun way, the flavorful way is go all in and have 50% of your army as these PDF troopers and 50% of your army maybe as these hastily conscripted militiamen. There are some restrictions on the units that you can take. For example, there are no commissars, scions, ogrins or ratlings, epic heroes, engineers, preachers, or aircraft allowed in the Brood Brothers Auxilia. Side note, I think that there's a missed opportunity here. It would be very cool to have a corrupted commissar. I mean, he can still receive the Genestealer cult kiss if he gets captured, and to have a commissar rigidly enforcing discipline in worship of the emperor, he just happens to have 4 arms now, would be very cool. Scions not being allowed, I guess the precedent is that the elite of the Scholar Progenium, it would be very difficult for the Genestealer cult to infiltrate one of those facilities, but we used to have Alpha Legionnaire Scions in Psychic Awakening. So that would have been cool to see. They can absolutely be corrupted. Like with commissars, we have literally traitor enforcers for the chaos. The commissars can be corrupted. Ogryns should definitely have been allowed, because Ogryns should do as they're told. If the boss now says that we worship the emperor and he's got 3 arms, then the boss is right. Ratlings, I do understand not being allowed. They are quite crafty, and they've got a really ingrained sense of self-preservation. If they see things going a bit squiffy in the regiment, they're going to boo-boo. Epic heroes, it makes sense that Leontus isn't going to be suddenly worshipping the 4-armed emperor, but I think sometimes leaving those heroes in there and giving players the opportunity to convert up a Genestealer cult Strachan, and it doesn't look anything like Strachan, but it's an epic combat character. It's a missed opportunity from sort of a modelling point of view, and a counts as hero point of view. Engine Seers, I guess the idea is that it's hard for the Genestealer cult to infect a relatively mechanical being, but we did see it in a Caiaphas Cain book that one time. Preachers, same reason, I guess. Commissars, they've been bumped off by the GSC early on. Not allowing aircraft is a really weird one. It's a really funny one, and I'm surprised at that. Let me know why you think Genestealer cult can loot Baneblades, but for some reason they can't loot planes. Now, in a moment, we are going to be diving into the stratagems and enhancements for this detachment, and then we'll be looking at some of the ways that I would build an army around it. But first, one thing that I think needs to be mentioned, and one thing that I initially just overlooked when I was looking at this, which is we're not playing an Imperial Guard army. Now, that sounds obvious, but what that means is we don't get access to the Imperial Guard army rules. And our army rules are our orders. So rather than having access to orders, instead we get access to Cult Ambush. If you're not familiar with how this works, each time one of your Genestealer cult's units is slain, rather than them just being taken off the board and dying, you have to roll a dice. And on a 5+, the unit is not slain and instead is put back into Cult Ambush. Kind of like a special kind of strategic reserve. You then get to place down a Cult Ambush token. Then in the following reinforcement step in your opponent's movement phase, so they don't come back straight away in your turn, they'll come back in your opponent's next movement phase, kind of like coming in from rapid ingress. You can bring one of your units in near one of these Cult Ambush tokens. There are some modifiers to that 5+ as well. So any units that die on turn 1 or turn 2 get +1 to the dice roll. There's no extra +1 for battle line units anymore. There used to be in the index, but now everyone just gets to come back on a 4+ turn 1 and turn 2, and then from turn 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter what you are, on a 5+, that's you going back into Cult Ambush. Characters and vehicles cannot come back, and if an enemy moves within 9 inches of one of your markers, you lose that Cult Ambush token, and potentially you lose a unit from coming back. But don't worry, there's loads of Genestealer cult ways of protecting those markers. You've got Genestealer cult characters, but you've also got some really cool stuff in the Brood Brothers attachment that lets you protect your Cult Ambush stuff. And before you worry that this only applies to Genestealer cult units, there are some things in the Brood Brothers attachment that let you get your Imperial Guard stuff back as well. And one of the principal ways that you are going to do this is via your stratagems. So like with the army rule, you're not going to have access to your normal stratagems with guard. You're not going to have access to fields of fire or anything like that, because those stratagems are linked to the guard combined arms attachment. And now we're not in a combined arms attachment, we're in a Brood Brother Auxilia detachment. The first stratagem that we get as part of the Auxilia is In the Shadow of Iron, and this is 1 command point. It is triggered when an enemy moves within 9 inches of a occult ambush marker. When they're trying to move close to your occult ambush markers and get rid of them and restrict the units that can come back. If they do that, then you can immediately redeploy that marker anywhere on the board as long as it is within 6 inches of a guard vehicle unit. So essentially, if someone tries to deep strike down and pick up a bunch of your markers, it's fine. You can, if you've left a little gap in your screen, or maybe they've jet boosted forward, or they've just broken through eyes, or something just not gone right, you can use In the Shadow of Iron for 1 command point, pick up a occult ambush token, and protect it. And that feeds into the Acolyte Icon Ward, which you can take, which can also protect a occult ambush marker. So it actually makes it really difficult for your opponent to get rid of these occult ambush markers. And maybe that allows you to be a little bit more aggressive with them. Or maybe if it's just a bit of an insurance policy if things aren't quite going the way you want them to. I have to say as well, the imagery behind this is really cool. The idea of a guard Lehman Russ powering forward down a rubble-strewn street, the enemy firing rounds it, and then before they even realize it, all this infantry comes boiling round the sides because they've been sheltering in the lee of the tank. It's like that scene in Fury where they're attacking the tree line. Really, really cool, and I like how not only this works in game and it's got a definite tactical use, but it can add that extra layer of immersion as well. The next stratagem is Suppress and Overwhelm. Again, this costs 1 command point, and if you shoot something with an Ashmilitarum unit, then the enemy unit cannot fire Overwatch, and all of your Genestealer cult units get to reroll charges against it. Now, the Overwatch side of things is okay. A lot of the time, someone's going to Overwatch you in the movement phase, but sometimes that's not always possible. The Overwatch thing, it'll crop up here and there. The big one is going to be the reroll charges. Even though our detachment is quite shooty focused with the integrated tactics, this is the Genestealer cult at the end of the day. We're still going to want to be getting choppy with things like Acolytes and Metamorphs and maybe Aberrants, although they've taken a little bit of a nerf. Point is, there's plenty of combat options in the GSC, and having something that gets you reroll charges is very, very nice. I feel like you're going to take a specific unit in mind to allow you to get those reroll charges. Not something you're going to necessarily do every turn, but maybe having a unit of Pure Strains, getting a sweet reroll, that could be nice. Another 1 command point stratagem is Symbiotic Destruction. Pick one of the guard units in your army and one of the Genestealer cult units in your army, and both of those units must target one nominated enemy unit. One unit that's marked for death, essentially. If you do so, then the guard unit and the GSC unit will both get reroll wound rolls of 1. Now, on the surface, this seems a little lackluster, but it's only 1 command point, and I really like the idea of using this on a Lehman Russ battle tank, because the battle tank will get full rerolls to hit from its own inbuilt datasheet ability, and if you're targeting enemy infantry, well, you're probably going to be wounding them on 2s anyway, because the battle cannon is strength 10. So having full rerolls to hit and then pseudo full rerolls to wound against the right target, I like it. And Lehman's battle tanks are a good take-all coverage unit. Anyway, we call them the El Clasico in the Guard for a reason, because there's never a bad situation for them. Yeah, I think that Symbiotic Destruction, it's cheap, it's got a little bit of play, and with the right unit can add a bit of damage boost. And at the end of the day, getting more damage out of an army is never a bad thing. Next, we have, for 1 command point, a Dark Network. You get to move 6 inches with a guard or Genestealer cult non-monster and non-vehicle unit after an enemy unit sets up on reserve within 12 inches. This is phenomenally good because it can be used both offensively and defensively. Offensively, if your opponent goes to deep strike down and wants to try and go after an objective, you can go, nope, 6 inches forward. I'm gonna lose this unit. I'm gonna lose probably these 20 guardsmen or these 10 neophytes or 20 neophytes. I'm gonna lose them, but I'm gonna be screening you out. And even if you charge through and chop all of my chaff to death, it doesn't matter because I've managed to hold on to the objective. So using this aggressively is quite good. You could also use it aggressively to take enemy objectives. It's a free 6-inch move. It's very good for screening, and it's very good for throwing a counterattacking, throwing a spanner into your opponent's aggressive maneuvers. Also, defensively, if someone drops down a very choppy unit and you don't really feel like receiving the charge from that unit, you can move 6 inches away and they might not physically be able to charge anymore. Especially if you've had a long 20-man unit screen a huge part of the battlefield out, the opponent deep strikes down thinking, right, I'm going to make up some lost ground, I'm going to get the charge, and you go, I think I'll just move a few inches back. You don't need to use the full 6 inches. I'll just move a few inches back, so now I'm out of 12 inches range, so you can't actually declare the charge. Also, if you've left a gap open and your opponent's going to deep strike down and maybe charge a valuable backfield damage dealing unit, maybe they're going to charge into the aforementioned Lehman Russ, and you're like, I really don't want them to destroy that. 6 move might allow you to move a unit in the way so your opponent can no longer charge the target they want to. Instead, they've got to chop their way through a bunch of chaff. Fantastic stratagem, loads of different play for it, can see it being used in many different ways. The second to last stratagem in the detachment is acceptable losses. Now, this costs 2 command points. It's very cool, it's very flavorful, it might be a little bit overcosted at 2 CP. How it works is, in your shooting phase, you can select 1 Ashman-Atom unit from your army. You can then select 1 enemy unit with an engagement range of 1 or more Genestealer cult units from your army. Until the end of the phase, your unit can make ranged attacks that target that enemy unit. If it does, after it has resolved those attacks, roll 1d6 for each of those Genestealer cult units. On a 5+, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 + 1 mortal wounds. I really like the imagery behind the rogue PDF. You know, they're in league with the Genestealer cult, but at the end of the day, they're still like, yeah, just kill those cultists, man. Who gives a shit? They're in combat. Yeah, we're fine. We're the trained troopers. They're just the citizens that have risen up. I quite like the ruthlessness of it and how it does create a little bit of a divide between the rogue guard and the cultists. Power-wise, what I like about it is that there's no -1 to hit. Often when you're trying to shoot into combat, and you can do that with, for example, Big Guns Never Tire, you have like a -1 to hit because you're trying not to like hit your troopers that might be in combat with the enemy monster, for example. There's nothing like that. You can just go, nope, I'm just going to shoot him. You're not suffering -1 to hit because you're not trying to aim all that well. You're just throwing rounds into the maelstrom. So again, I quite like that. That's a good advantage that it has. Also, potentially, you can do this into any combat. So it's not just monsters. You can use this to free up all sorts of units. What I quite like about it is you could use one of your guard units to free up one of your Genestealer cult units, which then might be able to go off and do some charging if you kill all of the enemies, or then shoot themselves in their own shooting phase, if they might not be able to, if they didn't have like pistols, stuff like that. So there's loads of different layers to this. It's very flavorful. It can get you to do damage, and you don't suffer -1 to hit, and it can open up extra shooting and extra charging. So it's powerful. 1 CP I think would probably be too cheap for all that, but 2 CP feels like a bit too expensive. If only you could do like 1.5 CP, but you can't. And last but certainly not least, we have Regimental Reinforcements, which costs 1 command point. Now, this is very similar to the Guard Reinforcement stratagem, but with a twist. Firstly, you can't use it in any phase. It must be used in the shooting phase or the fight phase. And you use it on an Ashman-Atom infantry regiment unit from your army, so not sentinels, when it is destroyed. Now, the effect of this stratagem is you get to roll a dice, and on a 3+, you can place 1 cult ambush marker anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy units. And you add a new unit to your army, which is identical to the destroyed unit, and you put it in cult ambush. Now, what's important here is, as per the recent balanced data slate, the Genestealer cult FAQ has also been updated, and this stratagem is now affected by the change to stratagems that add units back to your army. Long story short, you cannot use regimental reinforcements to get round the balanced data slate. If you successfully add a unit back into your army, that's it. You can't use a stratagem anymore. What I find quite interesting about the stratagem is, firstly, if you don't make the 3+, if you roll a 1 or a 2, then you haven't added the new unit to your army, and as a result, next turn you could have another go. It's only if you make that 3+ is the stratagem then limited. Right, that's it, once per game, you're done, you can't try it again. But on top of this, I think it's worthy of mentioning that this happens on a 3+. If you look at other units that can call ambush, it happens on a 5+ unless it's turn 1 or 2, and then it gets to happen on a 4+. So this is a very reliable way, a very effective way of getting a unit into call ambush. But what's really important about this is the fact that you get to place a call ambush marker anywhere on the battlefield. You get a call ambush token. And the quirky thing with call ambush is you don't need to use that token on a specific unit. So let's say that you lose a unit of pure strain Genestealers and they successfully roll the 4+ and they get into call ambush. Brilliant. You place that token down, but then before you're able to bring your unit in, the enemy moves within 9 inches of it and that token is taken away. Now, if you're unfortunate, that might mean that you can't bring those Genestealers back in unless you start generating other call ambush tokens. But thanks to this stratagem, rather than having to fish for 4s or even fish for 5s, you can get it off on a 3+. You end up putting the PDF back into the Brood Brothers back into call ambush, but you can use that token to bring back these hypothetical pure strains. It's just a great way of starting to get more call ambush tokens into the game and giving you options for which units you want to start bringing back from that cult ambush pool. But it's not only stratagems that you get with the Brood Brother Auxilia. Of course, you also get a unique set of enhancements for your characters. And here I do think there is a little bit of a missed opportunity, because these enhancements can only be put on Genestealer cult infantry models. You can't put them on an Ashton character. I think it would have been really cool to have one that was like Rebel Commander or something like that, or Infiltrated Command Chain. But as it is, you have to put these on your GSC characters. It's not a big deal. It's just, I think, a missed opportunity. But I'll stop focusing on the negatives. Let's look at the positives. And our first enhancement is Martial Espionage. You put this on a GSC infantry model and it can buff a friendly Ashton Militarm infantry or mounted unit once per turn, and this unit has to be within 9 inches. And the benefit of this buff is your unit gains an extra AP, and that's really good. That's like pseudo Withering Hail. That's like pseudo Fields of Fire. And what really pops out for me with this one is you can kind of recreate the old take aim order. If you have a unit of Krieg in your army, their Grim Demeanor ability would give them +1 to hit, and then this would give them extra AP. It's like, hey boys, we're back in 9th edition now, and anyone who played 9th edition will tell you, getting AP on just infantry, just running around lasgun things to death was really, really potent. The next enhancement is Adaptive Reprisal. Again, you can only put this on an infantry character, and you select one Genestealer cult unit within 9 inches. This won't affect your Ashton Militarm allies. And you can use Heroic Intervention for 0 command points. That's pretty spicy. Now, it's important to note that because Adaptive Reprisal mentions a specific stratagem, it still allows you to do it for 0 CP. There has been a change with the balanced data slate where if you get stratagems for free but it's not named, rather than being free, they go down to 1 less command point and you get them a bit cheaper. But this does specifically mention Heroic Intervention, so yes, you can still do that for 0 CP with Adaptive Reprisal. I think this has the potential to be very spicy if used well. What's going through my mind is active screening. So screening is something that you do in the guard to stop people from getting to your high value units. So you take a bunch of guardsmen, you put them up front, so if a bunch of berserkers come charging in, they munch a unit of guardsmen rather than munching down your valuable Leman-Russ battle tank. But normally what happens is you just lose your unit and then you have to wait till your turn to try and like blow those berserkers back into the warp from whence they came. But with this, you could do what I'd like to name active screening, where someone charges your sacrificial unit, but you target a unit of pure strains or aberrants or something else that's pretty horrific in melee, and you go, oh, I'm going to countercharge you. So now, rather than just absorbing the blow, you've got a sacrificial unit out there. It's going to get mulched, but you're going to have a chance to actually deal with this enemy unit in combat in your turn, and that could free you some shooting up to go onto other targets when it comes to your next turn. So Adaptive Reprisal, it's going to work well with traditional guard screening tactics. The next enhancement is the Hero Returned. You put this on a GSE infantry model and you get +1 objective control and +1 leadership for the unit that they are leading. This is a great way of taking units that normally aren't very OC intensive and making them OC intensive, getting around one of the key weaknesses of elite units, which can often be out OC'd by a handful of battle line infantry, or with Pariah Nexus putting an emphasis on battle line, it allows you to out OC even OC intensive enemy battle line stuff. At the end of the day, having more objective control is always a good thing. Having more leadership can help avoid those annoying moments when you get battle shot on an objective. For me, the big winner of this is the extra OC. The extra leadership is a nice to have. It's an alright enhancement. I can't see myself taking it every game, but I can see myself taking it if I've got a few points left over. Lastly, we have Firepoint Commander. GSE infantry model, themselves and the unit they're leading get to Overwatch on a 5+. Not bad. Kind of again leans into this idea of active screening. A unit that's got a Firepoint Commander getting to do a lot of Overwatch, weakening the enemy as they come in, and then another unit getting the ability to do adaptive reprisals. You could really blunt someone's offensive. And what I quite like about combining these two together is it starts throwing a spanner in the works and really punishing those assault armies. And we are seeing assault armies seeing a bit of a rise. World Eaters had a bit of a surge in their win rate recently. And overall, people running at you and chopping you up is a big problem that often guard, and in this case Brood Brother style armies, I imagine, can face. You want to keep the enemies at arm's length, you want to try and be shooting them to death. Well, Brood Brothers not only has a bit of its own combat thanks to GSE being a good combat army, but now you're having ways of being able to mess with other people's combat, and that feels especially Genestealer cult, because it's not just about what you do, it's about being tricksy. It's about having these ambushes and these plans set up, and the enemy thinks they're going to come charging in and just sweep you onto one side, but the Genestealer cult, via their shenanigans, are able to flip situations on their head. So just having 5 Overwatch on its own is good. Combining this with some clever tactics and some active screening could make this a pretty spicy one. So that covers pretty much all of the rules surrounding the Brood Brother Auxilia. But now let's look into the kind of units you'd want to field in this detachment. For me, there are a couple of obvious standouts. You've got the Death Corps of Krieg and you've got the Lehman Russ battle tanks. Death Corps of Krieg can get +1 to hit and +1 to wound thanks to their inbuilt Grim Demeanor ability. So they're less susceptible to things like not having orders. On top of this, the Krieg Medipack is similar to a cult icon in that it allows you to bring back D3 Lost Kriegers a turn. Lehman Russ battle tanks, like we mentioned earlier in the video, are also a bit less susceptible to lacking take aim because they have their own inbuilt full rerolls to hit when targeting enemy units on an objective, and even if they're just targeting a unit that's not an objective, they still have reroll 1s to hit. I think Hellhounds are another unit which can be a really valuable part of the Brood Brother detachment. Firstly, they automatically hit. So again, they're not impacted by a lack of take aim. They can just run around with all the flamers burning shit to death. And secondly, and what I think is really cool, the Hellhound Flush Them Out ability also affects your GSC, not just the guard units in the detachment. You see, the way the ability is worded, in your shooting phase after this model has shot, select one enemy unit that was hit by one or more of those attacks. Until the end of the phase, that unit cannot have the benefit of cover. You see, unlike things like Sentinel Daring Recon, where it specifically says Astra Militarum units benefit from this, you're not targeting the Ashman attack units, you're not buffing your units, you're debuffing the enemy unit. And as a result, that enemy unit won't get the benefit of cover when the Brood Brother Auxiliary Guard units shoot them, and they won't get the benefit of cover when the Brood Brother GSC units shoot at them as well. And lastly, similar to the Lehman Russ, the Hellhound brings something that the GSC don't normally have access to, which is cheap, heavy armor. Hellhound's got a 2+ save, Lehman Russ has got a 2+ save. Genestealer vehicles are eminently light. They're civilian units which have been pushed into service, and they might have a rugged construction, but it's not a 2+ save. And it covers a gap. It covers a weakness in the army, and this is one of the best things about being able to have allies, and why GW is very conservative with them these days, because if they add them too much, it can really start breaking the game. It allows you to have the benefits of 2 armies and use each army to cover the weaknesses of each other. Essentially, when you are looking at adding a guard unit to your Brood Brother Auxiliary, there are 3 factors you want to take into account. Number 1, do they have a way of getting around not having orders, or they don't really care about orders in general? Secondly, do they have an ability which either can actively boost the Genestealer cult units in your army, or at the very least is still relevant, even if it just affects themselves? And lastly, can that unit cover a gap? Can that unit cover a weakness that Genestealer cult traditionally have? And of course, it's also important never to lose sight of the fact that integrated tactics requires you to have line of sight and be within 18 inches. So you want units that don't mind getting up close and personal, getting into the danger zone. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you tempted by the Brood Brother Auxilia as a guard player? Or do you think that the trade-offs are not worth it and that it's just better sticking with the stratagems you know and the lethal hits as well? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.